interventionism. Libertarians believe that the purpose of the United States military is to defend the national security of the United States and U.S. territory from risk of attack. It doesn't mean that we have to wait to be attacked, but if there's a risk of attack.
So if you really, really thought that Saddam Hussein is a danger to the United States, then it is, and you are acting in self-defense, then it is not unlibertarian to attack that person, but there has to be a big...
Well, I think more than just a danger. There are several countries around the world that present a danger to us right now. Some of which we've aided in the past, and some of which we may aid right now that still present a danger to us. But I think an imminent danger is what's important. That distinction, that there has to be indisputable evidence that an attack is happening, and then that's when appropriate action could be taken.
Do you think that there was imminent danger in our most recent war on terrorism?
I think it's. I'm certainly in no position to, quantify the evidence to know what was going on in that situation. I don't think that the case was made to the American people that was what was going on, and I think that's what's most important, is that if our country is going to involve itself in a protracted engagement as we have done in Iraq, that we need to have the people of the United States on board, and if you don't have the people behind it, then who's really running the show?
Well, let me ask both of you this then, given what you know about the military and your experience and your viewpoints. How would you have felt if you would have been drafted and gone to combat and been in this war?
Fortunately, with the system that we have today, there's rarely an instance where someone would be pulled into service without their consent, and I think it's fortunate that we have a system that we do today for that.
Sure, but what if you were?
But what if we were? Well, from a veteran's standpoint, if I could be so bold as to represent that large group, I would say that every person that I know who served in the United States Armed Forces has such a desire and such a patriotism that they would go wherever they were called.
I think if it's it goes back to what you were saying before about the case has to be made to the American people, and it has to be something that the American people are convinced of, and that's how it should be done. Rather than deciding arbitrarily we're going to go to war.
Right.
I mean, in the Gulf War and certainly after 9/11, I don't think you have any trouble getting any number of Americans to volunteer to go and try to get Osama bin Laden or whoever is responsible.
Oh, I even thought about that myself, except for I was 50 years old at the time. I witnessed draftees being killed. It has never set well with me. I volunteered, and I did it because I wanted to fight for freedom. But I don't feel that because I feel a particular way that I should enforce that upon others. If a war is actually necessary to the national security of the United States, there will be no shortage of volunteers to fight it. And happily, luckily, we have an all-volunteer force now, and I support our all-volunteer force. And I believe that national defense being a truly legitimate purpose of government according to libertarian principles, that we should support our troops, that we should give them adequate pay and adequate benefits. If we want people to enlist voluntarily, then we have to pay the price for that. And I also believe that the veterans should get their benefits, that many veterans joined because of the promise that they would get their benefits, and I believe that they should be fully funded. I don't believe that veterans' benefits are welfare. Welfare is just something that's given away to anybody, whereas the veterans' benefits...
They've earned it.
They've earned it.
It was a job, they earned it.
Exactly.
It was part of their contract.
It was part of their contract, absolutely, and if you're injured fighting overseas, then you should definitely, I think, whether or not you agree with the war, and I think that's a good point, whether or not we agree with the war, I think it's important that we do support the troops because they're over there doing what they're told to do by our duly elected government, whether we agree with it or not. And it's not up to them to debate the merits of the war. They're over there to do what they're told and do a job.
Their job is to follow orders. And I think that I respect every soldier who's wherever they're stationed, because they might not always have the decision, and oftentimes they don't have the decision to choose where they go. But the fact is that they're out there, they're doing what was requested of them, and they're doing it honorably.
Yeah.
It's the obligation of the leaders of this nation to only put our soldiers and Marines and airmen in harm's way where it's absolutely necessary for the national security of the United States. The best way that we can support our troops is to use them wisely, and not to put them in a situation where they can't win, or where it's just not necessary for the national security of the United States.
What more precious resource could you have than the lives of other humans? And that's not something to blink your eye at.
Yeah.
If you're going to make a decision to move people into a danger zone, to a combat area, you have to respect the fact that you're putting people's lives in danger.
Now, of course, there's disagreement amongst libertarians of what constitutes an actual threat to national security. During this last Gulf War, the Iraq War, there was a certain amount of disagreement in libertarian circles about whether or not Saddam Hussein and his regime actually constituted a threat sufficient for us to respond militarily.
Yeah, I don't know if it's necessary to go into that, just to state that basically the libertarian philosophy is to stay out of other countries unless they have attacked us or there's an imminent threat of attack. And libertarians, of course, are going to have a sliding scale of whether or not they believe
We were attacked
George Bush or not.
September 11th,
Yeah.
too.
Well,
Whether or not Saddam Hussein, they're convinced Saddam Hussein. So there are some.
That's
but
a different.
I think that would really, what we're talking about here is how being a veteran pertains to the philosophy. If we get into, arguing over that, but there always is we have a party of individuals.
Right. Well, that brings me to a question, which is, at what point did you decide that the Libertarian Party was for you, and why?
Well, I'd always been a de facto libertarian. I guess that was 1974. I got a solicitation in the mail, and I became a dues-paying member of the party and have been ever since. I became a de facto libertarian, I guess, when I was 11 years old, and I didn't agree with everything in the libertarian position, at least not as far as non-interventionism is concerned. That occurred after I got back from Vietnam and reconsidered my position. But since 1974, I've been a dues-paying member of the party.
Okay, and what about you, Nolan?
I actually became involved with the Libertarian Party during the 2000 election. When I was looking at, it was the first time that I was in a position to vote. In '96, as I mentioned before, I was in Kuwait, and I received an absentee ballot. Whether it was effective or not, I'll never know. But I take very seriously the opportunity that I have in this country to make my voice heard at the ballot box, and so I was very seriously considering the candidates, and it was actually thanks to a program, cable C-SPAN program that showed the various candidates, third-party candidates, that I really got to see the whole spectrum of political philosophies that are out there. And once I was exposed to that, and I heard some of the words and responses from Harry Browne, who was the presidential candidate at that time, that I really felt that this was a party that I could really stand behind. And more importantly, I've been a patriot throughout my life, and I've always been very interested in the law and in the rights and freedoms that are granted us as Americans, as opposed to several other different countries around the world. And no other party that I've found stands up for those principles and stands up for those rights that have been guaranteed to us throughout centuries than the Libertarian Party. And that was something that affected me deeply.
And you've been, I'm sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say, can you give some specifics, like what specifically struck you? If you had to name like 3 things.
3 things that I think are extremely important. I would say nothing more so than the namesake of the party, which is liberty, personal freedom, the ability to determine for oneself what you will do in your life, and access to information. It seemed to me that a lot of the programs that have been instituted have caused a constriction in resources for the country, and with those resources being placed, those requirements being placed on states and different programs, I felt that there